October 22, 2012. 7:18 p.m. A quiet private screening room off Sunset Boulevard. The lights come up slowly, not all at once, just enough to reveal a dozen industry faces pretending not to look at one another. Agents, a publicist, two studio executives seated a little too far apart. The air smells faintly of espresso and carpet cleaner. The film has just ended. It's the kind of performance people usually lean toward each other to praise immediately. The kind that generates nods before the credits finish rolling. A performance that, in another year, would already be halfway to a nomination. But tonight no one claps. They wait. Because the man everyone expects to stand, to smile, to thank the room doesn't. He remains seated, still, hands folded loosely in his lap, not withdrawn, not defiant, just finished. You can almost feel the calculation ripple outward. The publicist glances toward the door. The studio executive checks his phone, then puts it face down again. Someone clears their throat. This was supposed to be the beginning. Instead, it's an ending. No announcement is made, no declaration, no speech about principles or protest. The star doesn't say he's opting out, he doesn't say anything at all. He thanks the room politely, shakes a few hands, and leaves through a side exit used mostly by assistants. By morning, the first email goes out. Just checking availability for upcoming screenings. It receives a courteous reply. He won't be attending but appreciates the support. Another follows, a lunch, a Q&A, a small, friendly round table with voters. Each request is declined with the same tone, warm, professional, final. No tantrum. No demands. No press leaks. Just absence. And in Hollywood, absence is never neutral. Because Oscar campaigns are not about trophies, not really. They are endurance rituals. They measure how badly you want the industry to love you and how willing you are to prove it publicly, over and over, on cue. The screenings aren't for discovery. Everyone important has already seen the film. The interviews aren't for insight. The questions are known in advance. The lunches aren't social. They're compliance checks. Are you grateful enough? Are you humble enough? Are you still hungry? The system rewards those who perform enthusiasm until exhaustion, who repeat admiration for their collaborators like a mantra, who never appear tired of wanting. And the star at the center of this story knows that. He's played the game before, campaigned, shaken hands until his wrist ached, answered the same question about process with a different anecdote each time, smiled through compliments that felt like obligations. But this year, something has shifted. Not publicly, internally. The performance everyone just watched came from a place that surprised even him. It wasn't strategic, it wasn't timed, it wasn't designed to position him. It arrived fully formed, and then it asked for nothing. That's the problem. Because the industry expects reciprocity, if it gives you praise, you must amplify it. If it gives you attention, you must mirror it back with visible desire. And when that desire doesn't appear, people grow uneasy. By mid-November, whispers begin. Not accusations, confusion. Is he okay? Is this a negotiation tactic? Does he think he's above it now? The studio doesn't panic, not yet. They assume this is temporary, a strategic pause before the push. Maybe he's conserving energy, maybe he'll reappear closer to voting. They keep the campaign infrastructure intact, billboards stay up, trade ads continue, consultants remain on retainer. All waiting for a signal. It never comes. What no one sees, what no one is invited into, is the private exhaustion underneath the decision. The star hasn't grown arrogant, he hasn't grown detached. He's grown quiet. Quiet in the way someone becomes after realizing that wanting something loudly enough has begun to feel like self-betrayal. Each invitation he declines feels less like refusal and more like relief, not because he dislikes the industry, but because he's tired of translating his work into appetite. He's tired of selling sincerity. Psychologically, something subtle is happening. The external audience, the imagined jury inside his head, is losing authority. The need to be received, validated, interpreted, it's loosening. And with that loosening comes fear. Because in Hollywood, visibility is insurance, Absence looks like risk, and risk is usually punished. Except this time it is. Weeks pass. December arrives. The nomination list starts circulating in drafts and predictions. His name appears less frequently, then disappears, then reappears in quieter columns. The studio considers pushing harder. They don't. Because something unexpected is happening behind closed doors. Instead of frustration, there's recalibration. Executives stop asking why he isn't campaigning and start asking what this means. Peers stop speculating about arrogance and start describing restraint. Voters, many of whom have survived decades of the same ritualized gratitude, notice the silence. Some feel unsettled by it, others feel an unfamiliar respect. Not admiration. Respect. And that distinction matters. Because admiration demands performance. Respect tolerates distance. By the time the nominations are announced, the outcome almost feels secondary. The real shift has already occurred. The industry hasn't rejected him. It has begun to reinterpret him. And that reinterpretation, quiet, undocumented, and irreversible, is about to change how power flows toward him for the rest of his career. January 10, 2013. 8:03 a.m. A conference room inside a Beverly Hills public relations firm. A flat-screen TV hums softly against the wall, coffee cups sit untouched, phones are face-up now. The nominations scroll across the screen. Names are read, categories fill. Applause breaks out in 2-second bursts, polite, automatic. Someone types quickly on a laptop. Someone else exhales through their nose, not disappointed, not relieved, just registering. Then it's over. His name isn't there. No gasps, no outrage, no dramatic silence. Just a small, collective nod, as if the room has confirmed something it already suspected. And here's the part that rarely gets said out loud: no one is surprised. Not because the performance wasn't worthy, everyone in that room knows it was. They've said so privately, repeatedly, with sincerity. But awards season isn't a meritocracy, it's a choreography. And he missed his cues. Oscar campaigns are built on a shared fiction that recognition is spontaneous, that voters simply notice, that art floats upward naturally. In reality, the system runs on repetition and reassurance. You are seen because you show up. You are remembered because you remind. You are rewarded because you demonstrate desire. This isn't corruption, it's psychology. Human beings respond to proximity. Familiarity, effort. The campaign isn't about convincing voters you're good, it's about reminding them that you care. And caring in this ecosystem must be visible. The star knew all of this, which is why his absence felt so loud. Not confrontational loud. Existential loud. Because when someone who understands the ritual chooses not to perform it, it forces everyone else to look at the ritual itself. Suddenly, questions surface that are usually buried under brunch invitations and trade ads. Why do we need to be thanked so many times? Why does hunger feel more respectable than confidence? Why does restraint make us uncomfortable? No one asks these questions publicly, but they register internally, individually. The campaign consultants quietly close their files, the studio reallocates budget, the press moves on. And yet something doesn't snap back to normal. Instead of fading, the star's image begins to settle. Without interviews to amplify talking points, the performance stands alone, no narrative scaffolding, no emotional guide rails. People rewatch the film privately, on planes, at home, without a Q&A framing how they're supposed to feel. The work breathes differently that way. And the star, now absent from the awards circuit entirely, becomes something else. Not a contender. A reference point. Psychologically, this is where the shift deepens. The industry runs on a shared anxiety that relevance decays quickly if not constantly fed, that stillness equals disappearance. But here stillness produces density. Instead of being everywhere, the star becomes harder to place, harder to predict, harder to manage. Agents notice first. When scripts arrive, they're no longer framed with urgency or leverage. No more "this is perfect timing" or "everyone's watching you right now." The tone changes. Projects are presented with patience, with respect, as if the star's attention itself has become the prize. That's new. Studios, too, begin adjusting unconsciously, meetings feel less transactional, offers come with fewer expectations attached. There's an unspoken sense that pressure won't work here. And pressure in Hollywood is usually the lever. The star hasn't gained power by demanding it. He's gained it by making himself unavailable to be rushed. Emotionally, this costs him something. He feels the sting of the omission. Of course he does. Anyone who claims otherwise is lying. Recognition leaves a mark even when you refuse to chase it. There are moments late at night scrolling past congratulatory headlines when he wonders if restraint was a mistake, if silence was misread, if this was the year that should have cemented something publicly. But those moments pass, because something else replaces them. A steadiness. The internal jury has gone quiet. Without the need to perform gratitude, he begins choosing differently. Roles aren't evaluated by momentum or optics, they're evaluated by resonance. Does this ask something real of me? Does this require explanation, or does it stand on its own? That internal shift is invisible to the industry, but its effects aren't. The star starts working less, and somehow meaning more. Directors approach him without pitch decks, without timelines, just conversations, exploratory, unhurried. Peers speak about him differently now, not with envy, not with gossip. With caution. The kind reserved for people who don't need what you're offering. And in Hollywood that's rare. Because most power is loud. This kind is. It accumulates quietly, in the pauses between calls, in the projects that wait, in the realization that someone has stepped outside the cycle without being ejected from it. By the time the awards season fades into memory, the real consequence becomes clear. The star didn't lose status. He shed velocity. And in doing so, he gained gravity. What no one yet understands, what will take years to fully register, is that this wasn't just an awards decision. It was the beginning of a career pause. Not a retreat. A recalibration. And Hollywood, slowly, reluctantly, is about to reorganize itself around that absence. March 4, 2013. 6:41 p.m. A quiet restaurant in West Hollywood, the kind without a sign. The waiter doesn't recognize him at first, that's intentional. He chose the place because it's forgotten by the circuit, no agents hovering near the bar, no executives accidentally stopping by. He orders simply, eats slowly. This is what the pause looks like from the inside. Not exile, not retreat, but deceleration. In Hollywood, careers are measured by forward motion. Momentum is treated like oxygen. If you're not moving, the assumption is that you're falling. But the star has discovered something counterintuitive. Stillness changes the geometry of power. Without announcements or justifications, he begins turning down meetings that feel performative, general meetings, catch-ups, conversations that exist solely to confirm continued availability. He doesn't ghost anyone, that would be aggressive, that would invite interpretation. Instead, he delays. A reply comes days later, then weeks, always kind, always final. Psychologically, this is where the real shift takes hold. For decades, his inner life was organized around anticipation, what's next, who's watching, how this choice will land. That mental posture creates constant low-grade vigilance. The pause dissolves it. Without an imagined audience, decisions feel heavier but cleaner, fewer, more deliberate. And the industry feels it. Offers arrive with different framing now, less urgency, less pressure disguised as opportunity, fewer phrases like now or never. Instead, whenever you're ready. If this speaks to you, we can wait. Waiting is not something Hollywood does easily. Which is how everyone knows something fundamental has changed. Other stars notice too, quietly, privately. At dinners and festivals, someone will lean in and ask, not jokingly, "How did you pull that off?" He doesn't answer directly, there isn't a strategy to explain, no formula to teach. The truth would sound too simple to be believable. He stopped wanting to be seen wanting. And that altered the entire exchange. Legacy begins to behave differently after that point. The roles he eventually accepts aren't louder, they're sharper, they don't explain themselves, they don't chase relevance. Critics start using a new vocabulary around him, words like contained, unforced, uninterested in display. None of that was engineered. It emerged because the work was no longer accompanied by self-translation. And here's the final irony. Years later, when he does return to awards attention on his own terms, it feels earned in a way campaigns never do, not because of effort but because of absence. The industry treats him less like a participant and more like a fixed presence, someone you don't summon, someone you wait for. That's the quiet alchemy of the pause. Power doesn't always announce itself when it arrives. Sometimes it settles in when you stop reaching for it. And once it does, the industry never quite speaks to you the same way again. September 14, 2015. 11:27 a.m. A production office on the Warner Bros. Lot. A script sits untouched in the center of the table. No one is pitching it. That's the strange part. 3 executives are present, a director, an agent on speakerphone. Everyone has already read the material, everyone knows why they're here, and yet no one is doing what usually happens in rooms like this: selling. Instead, the conversation circles quietly around one question, never stated outright. Would he even want this? That question would have been unthinkable a few years earlier. Scripts used to be designed for him, tailored, optimized, positioned. The assumption was that interest could be generated through incentives, prestige, timing, narrative advantage. Now none of that feels appropriate. Because the star has become something else in the ecosystem. Not unreachable. Unpressurable. Hollywood has an instinctive relationship with hierarchy. It senses where leverage lives even when no one names it. And over the years following the award season withdrawal, the industry has begun making subtle accommodations around him. Schedules bend, development timelines stretch, projects wait in limbo without resentment. This isn't generosity. It's recognition. The kind that emerges when someone has demonstrated, without confrontation, that they do not require the system's validation to continue existing within it. Psychologically, this triggers a reordering. Most careers operate on borrowed urgency. The industry supplies the clock and the artist races against it. Deadlines create dependency. Dependency creates compliance. The star quietly stepped off that clock. And when someone does that without vanishing, the system is forced to recalibrate. Other actors feel it indirectly. They sense that there is now a different lane, narrow, demanding, and unavailable to most, in which pace is not dictated externally. Some resent it, some admire it, some misunderstand it entirely. But no one ignores it. The star's reputation shifts again, not through headlines but through tone. People lower their voices when discussing him, not out of fear but out of uncertainty. Because uncertainty is destabilizing. You can negotiate with ambition. You can manage hunger. You can exploit urgency. But someone who appears content without outcome, that's harder. This is where legacy quietly takes shape. Not as accumulation but as boundary. The star works less frequently now, but each appearance carries weight disproportionate to screen time. His presence signals intention, care, selectivity. And audiences feel it, even if they can't articulate why. There's a difference between someone who is everywhere and someone who arrives. Hollywood understands arrival. By the late 2010s, younger filmmakers speak his name differently, not as a goalpost but as a reference. That's the kind of career you earn if you survive long enough to stop chasing. That phrase, "stop chasing," would have terrified him once. Now it defines him. The pause that began as a quiet refusal has matured into a permanent shift in posture. He is no longer orbiting the industry. The industry orbits him. And what's most revealing is this. No one ever asked him to explain himself. Because explanations would have returned him to the old economy, where meaning must be justified, allowed to be accepted. Instead, silence did the work. Absence taught the lesson. And the industry, reluctantly but precisely, learned how to listen. November 3, 2018. 11:27 a.m. A production office on the Warner Bros. Lot. The meeting starts late. Not because anyone is disorganized, but because no one wants to be the person who looks impatient. Phones are silent, Assistants hover outside the glass walls instead of inside them. A junior executive stands, then sits again, unsure whether standing feels too eager. This is what recalibration looks like in real time. The star hasn't arrived yet, he may not arrive at all. The meeting was framed loosely if he feels like stopping by. No calendar block, no expectation. 5 years ago, this would have been unthinkable. Back then, studios structured rooms to assert control, start times, agendas, pressure points disguised as enthusiasm. Now control has softened into caution. Because something has shifted at the root level. The industry has quietly rewritten its rules around him. Not officially, not in policy, but culturally. No one asks why he takes so long between projects anymore. That question has disappeared. In its place is an assumption he's choosing. And choice, when exercised without anxiety, signals authority. The psychological center of gravity has moved. Earlier in his career, power flowed toward those who controlled access: studios, financiers, awards bodies. Visibility was leverage, approval was currency. Now, power flows toward those who can withhold themselves without consequence. That's the distinction everyone feels but rarely names. The star enters the room eventually, no entourage, no announcement. He greets people warmly but without the subtle apology that once accompanied his presence. There's no "sorry I'm late," because there is no lateness when no one owns your time. The conversation is brief, focused, almost sparse. He asks 2 questions, not about budget, not about awards, about intention. Why this story? Why now? The room responds carefully, thoughtfully, as if meaning is being tested rather than sold. When the meeting ends, there's no handshake frenzy, no follow-up blitz, no rush to lock him down. Everyone understands that pursuit would be counterproductive. Because the star is no longer negotiating from ambition. He's negotiating from alignment. This is what Hollywood respects when it can't manipulate it. Emotionally, this stage of the journey is quieter than the earlier conflict, but deeper. The star no longer feels the internal tug-of-war between visibility and self-containment. That battle ended years ago. What remains is clarity. He understands now that his earlier exhaustion wasn't from working too much, it was from performing desire too often. Desire, when demanded, becomes labor. Refusing that labor didn't make him invisible. It made him opaque. And opacity changes how others behave around you. They project, they speculate, they adjust themselves. The industry begins to self-edit in his presence. Projects arrive more formed, conversations become more honest, flattery decreases, substance increases. Not because people are kinder. Because the usual levers don't work. This is the unspoken lesson that spreads quietly through Hollywood. Power does not always belong to the most wanted person in the room. Sometimes it belongs to the person who does not need to be wanted. By the end of the decade, the star's career looks unusual on paper. Gaps where momentum should be, long pauses between releases, fewer appearances than peers with half his stature. And yet his influence is unmistakable. You can trace it in how roles are written, in how patience re-enters certain negotiations, in how younger actors begin to experiment with restraint instead of saturation. Not many succeed. Because restraint only works when it's genuine. You cannot fake disinterest and expect authority. The industry senses hunger instantly. What the star did all those years ago, quietly, politely, without drama, was remove hunger from the exchange. And once hunger is gone, the relationship changes forever. The final realization arrives slowly, almost too late to notice. He didn't pause his career to regain power. He paused it because he no longer needed power to be granted. He had already stepped into it. February 9, 2022. 5:42 p.m. A soundstage just after wrap. The crew is packing up quietly. No applause, no speech, just the soft choreography of cables being coiled and lights dimmed. Someone thanks him for the day's work. He nods, smiles, and heads toward the exit before anyone can gather momentum around him. This is how it ends. Not with a culmination, but with consistency. Years have passed since the awards season he quietly stepped away from. The headlines have long since moved on. New stars cycle through the ritual. new campaigns rise and burn out. And yet his position has only clarified. What remains after the noise fades is not mystique for its own sake, it's something sturdier. Coherence. His career no longer tells a story of ascent or comeback, it tells a story of alignment. Each appearance feels intentional, not reactive, each absence feels natural, not strategic. Hollywood, which once measured him by output and appetite, now measures him by gravity. When his name appears on a call sheet, it changes how everyone behaves, not because of fear, because of tone. The set slows slightly, decisions feel more considered, the work takes itself more seriously. That's the final legacy of the pause. Not leverage over others, but influence over the environment. Psychologically, the transformation is complete. The internal audience that once demanded proof has dissolved. There is no longer a need to be understood in advance. The work can arrive without explanation, without translation. And that freedom, quiet, durable, earned, is rare. Younger actors still ask how he did it, how he stepped back without being erased, how he refused the machinery without becoming its enemy. There is no single answer. Because the truth is uncomfortable. He didn't outmaneuver the system. He outgrew a part of himself that needed it. The industry could adjust to that. It always does. But only after resistance, only after confusion, only after realizing that absence, when chosen calmly, can be more powerful than presence ever was. The year he refused the Oscar campaign didn't redefine his career overnight. It planted a delay. A delay in which the old rules lost relevance and new ones emerged without being announced. That's how power shifts in Hollywood. Not with statements, not with defiance, but with someone quietly deciding they no longer need to explain why they are enough.